July the 22nd, 2025. Guys, back when they started talking about building all the new AI plants and the crypto plants, the first thing we talked about on this channel was the power consumption and the noise and pollution levels and things like that. If you remember, people were really fussing about it in some towns in Texas, and it was really affecting them, their cattle and everything. It was so loud. But the power consumption is a big problem, and it's really hitting home quicker than I thought it would, because they talked about an expanded out, like a couple of year period before we would reach maximum power. And by that time, and even we've heard the White House talk about it, is these big AI centers, data centers, is basically what they are, should provide their own power independent of the grid, because the grid has not been built up, just like the airports have not been built up. But anyway, and I've seen this maximum grid alert come out 2 or 3 times this year already. Right now, what they're saying, and we're in a terrible heat wave. It's not quite as hot up in the Northeast, and this includes D.C., but they are saying they're at maximum right now because that section, the Northeast section, has a place in Loudoun County, Virginia, known as Data Center Alley. It's recognized as one of the largest hubs for data centers on the planet. Okay? Now, you're looking at the Con Edison area, and it's all in one big group, and I think it's part of what's called a PJM interconnection. We don't have it here in the South. You guys up there probably know more about it. But they're saying that it's simply no more capacity to meet new loads. And this is coming from Joe Bowring. He's the president of Monitoring Analytics, which is the independent watchdog for PJM interconnection, who Bloomberg quoted, "The solution is to make sure that people who want to build data centers are serious enough to bring their own generation capabilities." Now, the question about that has to come forward. What will it be? Will it be small mini nuclear plants? Will it be coal burners? Will it be all solar? Now, solar would be the best but because they're starting to shift the bigger plants back to coal and things like that out of necessity. But as far as these independent generators in these data centers, I don't know exactly how they will do it without pulling from the grid or pulling from the supplies, let me say that are needed for the grid that's in existence now. Now, you guys, I hope you don't get the heat wave that we have right now. We are cloudy for the last 5 minutes, just some, I think, heat clouds up above us, but it's down to 113 on the heat index, and an hour ago it was 123. And that's tough. It was tough at daylight. I mentioned that earlier because we didn't get any cooling rain overnight. And we're in the country, but it's really worse in the cities. You have that concrete heat build up. And that's the problem with it. You don't have water hitting the ground cooling. It's running off down the drains and everything else. It's just a concrete heater. Anyway, in the big cities, that's a problem. And if you start to get this heat wave, and you have had some, and I think you're going to see some more, then it's going to become critical. Because right now they're saying they are at maximum generation, no spare capacity. The largest U.S. power grid serving 65 million people across 13 states and D.C., part of PJM's territory, includes, again, Loudoun County, Virginia. And guys, we were very happy, that they took the 10-year moratorium out of the AI bill in the Big Beautiful bill. Remember, we watched most of that online. But even though the moratorium's gone, where no one can say anything or pass a bill against them or anything else, remember, it's like giving total control, it's still going forward. But one of the things that was not talked about is the fact that what they're saying here, the problem is that the next generation server racks at AI data centers, which are there now, are now consuming more than twice the power they did 2 years ago. For example, NVIDIA's GB200 AI rack draws 120 kilowatts, compared to 60 to 80 kilowatts for the earlier HGX models. So it's doubled in 2 years, the energy draw. Multiply that by thousands of racks in large hyperscale centers, and it's clear that AI computing is rapidly gobbling up grid capacity, while baseload power in the form of fossil fuel power generation has been retired. The Dems made sure of that. They're going to try to restart it, but they made sure that they were out to destroy this nation. They hated you. They hated every conservative. They hated the United States, and they all sold out. That may be coming home to roost. We really hope it is. But again, without building new power, guys, in the last 2 years, they've doubled the usage, the energy draw from the grids, and the grids are already weak. On Sunday, they're saying they cited the EIA short-term energy outlook for July, which showed that average summer wholesale power prices across the PJM, NISO, and ISO-Northeast grids are the highest in the nation. You're paying the highest prices already. Why there should be a lot more money coming from these data centers to reduce the cost to the consumers. If they're having to jack the entire price of the grid up, I think, maybe they need to put that in an AI bill. Anyway, these prices now far exceed those in Texas at ERCOT, the U.S. average, and even the traditionally high-cost West Coast markets. They now far exceed California and Oregon, Washington. The blame is squarely focused on the Dems' initiative to recklessly decarbonize power grids. Now, Boring, going back to the analytics market for PJM, they're saying that he is entirely right about grid limitations in the era of data center build-outs. Take, for example, just how fragile the grid is across the mid-Atlantic area. In Maryland, said we warned over the last year about the power crisis unfolding throughout that area. Last month, Pennsylvania boasted about saving Maryland's power grid from near collapse. The result of failed green policies and surging power demand has created a perfect storm that can constrain AI data center build-outs across the region. That would be a blessing. And that if it restricts AI, which is going to be tied directly to Bitcoin and all of that crap. But you got the same power consumption basically, because you're using a lot of computer power, right? Uses a lot of power, and even though they're doubling the power, some are being forced to go to more liquid cooled machines and all, but still they don't have it. And so Maryland, you guys have got to get the politics out of your grid. Here in the South, we don't have that problem. Now, we have all the normal problems. It gets hot, you blow a transformer, hurricanes get us, tornadoes, all of that. But we don't have problems with generation. Now, we're not that highly populated. We got better sense than that. We only have one city that's big enough to talk about. And it's a collapsed city called Jackson, Mississippi. And it is totally collapsed. But anyway, that's another good reason, guys. Think about the grid going down and you're in one of these concrete heat centers called cities. Even in a small town, I've seen it to where just that little bit of road work and concrete would be so hot you couldn't hardly stand it. And it's getting worse by the day. Again, we are back to 114, but before it clouded up, 123 it hit. And that's way above what they're saying and warning about on the weather alerts. But again, I wanted to come in and talk about this because the power consumption and this fact. AI has been used by everyone for a long time. I've got it on some thumbnails. I'm not going to make any music with it or video, but a couple of thumbnails, because to get the right picture for a video, sometimes you risk a copyright strike if you try to go in and get a photograph. And so you don't do that with AI, but that's about the only thing I use it for. But here's the problem is, and I'm not there if I'm talking about DC or something to take a picture, or I would do it like that, or wherever it's at across the nation. But the problem is here, and it really started back with the term Google it. And that was basically one of the earlier forms of AI. Now it's past that now, but you got to remember, if trash goes in, trash comes out, and there's always going to be a programmer involved. And until AI takes over completely, then it will become its own programmer, but it will still be using false data. It's easy to point that out, but here's the big problem, is that it's dumbing down the entire planet on purpose. The beast doesn't want you to think for yourself. Let it handle it. So now, because there's no analytical deep study, even in college or high school, they're hitting their phones in a search. They can tell you anything on the planet, but they never thought through it. They're reading. They're not thinking. So that ability of critical thought is being lost. Think about it. I remember 10 years ago, maybe, coming back from Arizona. It was nighttime and it got dark. I don't like driving at night. But anyway, I stopped at a little place up in the mountains, and I wanted to get a map. 'Cause nothing with phones weren't picking up. We were way out there, North Arizona. But so I said, I'd like to get one of those maps in the rack over there. It was a young girl, probably high school age, something like that. And she said, a map, do people still use those? And I said, yeah, I do. I've got one for every state I go through, but I don't have one for Arizona. And she was amazed. You know, GPS, everything. And you realize that because of that lack of critical thinking, there's going to be a lot of lost people if we do have the grid go down. But not only that, you're not going to be able to search the answers. You're going to have to dig deep. Now, people my age, and not just this old, but we all learned the hard way. We had books. We had to study. There weren't computers. I didn't have a calculator until I was taking trig in college. And it was the original Texas Instrument, big old one, but it worked. And I was happy to have it, and it was way more expensive than I thought I could afford, but we had to have it to get through the classes. Anyway, and again, that really is, it's not writing it down, but when I do remember this, when we actually had to take the test for these classes, we couldn't use the calculator. So it had to be stored up here. And the last test I remember, I'm just giving you an example, was I was studying for, I wanted to get my second class FCC license, working on my first class, get the second, got all that. But guys, it was 100 questions. The answer just about took a page up. Now, you had to go to the U.S. Postal Service. It's a federal employment thing, FCC licenses. Back then, it's a little different now. And it was 100 questions. You could miss 5 and pass. And so you had to have a notebook to write the answers in. But critical thinking is what got my generation to where they're at, the ability to think. But it's something that a lot of us don't think about that much, is the destruction of critical thinking because of AI. And what's happening, guys, is I was kind of doing an experiment the other day, but I wanted to, if you go to Google search right now, it'll try to throw you straight into, to let AI search out an answer or something like that, remember? And it was about, let me think for a moment. Anyway, it popped up there, and I said, well, let me just see what they're going to say before I went any further in a real search. And it was a biblical thing. I can't remember what it was, but it was almost accurate except for the most critical part. It had changed that. I'll put that in another video. I'll remember it, but I caught it right off the bat. And so, again, what are we going to be left with? Right now, this is what we have, and they're talking about possibly, the reason I brought that up about that mistake is I've heard people talk about watch for an AI Bible coming out, and it will be a #1 seller. And I'm going to go back, and I'm going to put it in a video maybe this evening on that question I asked. It had something to do with one of my videos. I just got to look it up. But right away, it looked real good, but it was very inaccurate for someone that doesn't know better. And that's the way the new AI Bible is going to be. But you watch for it coming out, and a lot of people will get it just out of interest. But it will become their doctrine. And that's a shame, because now I don't know if they'll print an AI Bible, or it will just be online. You can download it or whatever. But it's still going to be all input, not from our Father. But anyway, guys, not to go on about it any further, but again, this map is showing you where the critical zones are, and let's just take a look. I want to show you what one of the outlooks for as far as heat indexes are for the next week. Guys, and you're talking about 5 million people up in the Northeast, and just these states are in the heat advisory, heat watches. This is actually the extreme heat watch in this maroon, but in this, whatever color purple this is, whatever you call it, violet, whatever it is, that's the extreme heat warning. We're at level 3, like I mentioned this morning, and it only goes to level 4, but again, 123 earlier, it's been cloudy, like I said, and we're down to 113. But I want to click here. Let's go right in this area and look at the general area on that multi-day forecast looking forward. Now, right where I clicked brings up Arkansas. That's a good example. Tuesday, today, the 22nd, Arkadelphia. It's got the cities here on the left, and then the high maximum heat index forecast. And this has been way off by 10 degrees easily. And like I said, we were at 123. We have our own weather station. Anyway, 105 today, 106. But if you go all the way out here, it's going to give you the maximum day of 107, which is Sunday and Monday. Now, you can get down to 111 getting into Little Rock. And you got a lot more concrete there. 109, so 1, 2, 3, 4 days, 110, 110. But Little Rock today, 111. That's a little closer. Pocahontas, 113. Highest, 113. I guess that's the highest one on the entire map. But this goes out for the next 7 days. Look at that. Every day is in a bad heat situation. It's saying upper level high pressure will dominate through early next week, at least, with hot temperatures expected, at least through early next week. Plenty of heat and humidity is in store for Arkansas, with highs well into the 90s, maybe even triple digits this week. Heat indices will reach well over 100 degrees for many areas. So guys, make sure, just in case your power goes out, you at least got some type of generator, or we have 3 or 4 of the Ryobi fans that either run on battery or you can plug them in. They're called hybrids, and you can get them at Home Depot. We've talked about it for years. And they are way better than nothing if your power does go out. And we have a little backup solar too. And I highly recommend that. We're not on any grid. We'll never be. As far as tied in my solar, I'm on the local power grid here. But it's fairly cost effective to use it when I can, when it's there. But I have things running now on solar, and I can switch more to it if I have to. Now, I can cool the entire house. A couple rooms, yes, and that's enough to get us through, and a lot better than melting in it. Think about things like that, guys, but we're watching it. Again, this was mainly about the power consumption and the loss of critical thinking because of the beast system. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.